My fiancé and I have been in a relationship for just over 7 years, living together for the past 4, and engaged for the last 3. He's 27 and I'm 26. For this story, let's call us Liam and Mia. Over the past year, our relationship has started to exhibit some age-related strains, although nothing so severe that we couldn't overcome. Neither of us believes that legal marriage is essential, although I would have been okay with it if he had agreed. We believe that a natural commitment is far more important than a legal document, and we plan to remain engaged and committed to each other for life. Additionally, we intended to start having children within the next 12 to 18 months. Our issues arose from Liam's workaholic tendencies. This began affecting our intimacy. When we initially got together, we were intimate all the time, sometimes multiple times a day. This decreased to about 3 times a week around the 3rd year, and last year it was more like 2 times a week. Now we're down to less than 2 times a week, and sometimes we go more than a week without intimacy. My desire for Liam remains as high as ever, but his desire for me has plummeted due to his work commitments. He acknowledged that the stress and exhaustion from his job were causing issues but didn't take any action to address it. Last year, he received a promotion to assistant manager. This new position came with a higher salary, but considering the long hours he puts in, he's actually earning less per hour than before. It's hard to see how that's a promotion. We've had numerous conversations about this, but he insists he's doing it for our future and our future family. Liam explained that he was working diligently and saving money so that we could eventually buy a house, allowing me to stay home with our first child. I work at a call center for a bank and I despise it. While I appreciated his sacrifice, I was simply asking for a bit more of his time and affection. When I pressed the issue, things would improve temporarily, but then he'd revert back to working and I felt like an afterthought. Even when he was at home, he would often be on his laptop, handling store-related tasks or speaking with employees or customers on the phone. It became incredibly frustrating. During his rare moments of free time, instead of spending it with me, he preferred gaming and was part of a few gaming groups. He mentioned that gaming was a stress reliever for him and encouraged me to join, but it wasn't something I was interested in. I sensed that even though he still loved me deeply, something was missing in our relationship and we appeared to be growing apart. This brings me to the current situation. As I mentioned earlier, I work at a large call center where some of my colleagues are involved in open relationships or marriages. They claim that it has significantly improved their love lives. One of my coworkers, whom I'll refer to as Jane, had extensive conversations with me about this topic. About a month ago, she mentioned that she and her husband were interested in exploring an open relationship involving both Liam and me. She admitted that she found Liam very attractive and her husband thought I was quite appealing. I firmly declined this proposition because we were friends outside of work and the idea felt unsettling. Additionally, considering we worked in the same department, it could potentially lead to tension and HR-related problems. Despite my clear rejection, she occasionally brought up the topic, causing me to distance myself from our friendship. I couldn't help but see her differently once I learned of her interest in Liam. While we still had lunch together at times, we no longer spent time together after work. Several weeks ago, Jane informed me that the IT guy responsible for our department was in an open relationship with his wife. He's an attractive older man, perhaps in his very late 40s, and he's a kind, soft-spoken person who's in excellent shape. Jane suggested I should talk to him if I had any interest in exploring this topic. I told her I wasn't interested and that she was the one who kept bringing it up with me. However, several days later, this man, whom I'll call Jack, approached me in the break room and asked if he could join me. I agreed and he took a seat. We engaged in small talk for a while, and then he mentioned that Jane had informed him that I might be open to the idea of an open relationship. I was taken aback because I couldn't believe Jane had the audacity to share something like that after our conversation. I explained to Jack that I wasn't really interested and clarified that Jane, along with a few others, had been discussing this concept with me, but it didn't pique my interest. Jack suggested I should consider it, emphasizing that it can be quite healthy and beneficial for a relationship. He also mentioned that if I ever became interested, he would be honored to explore that path with me. I felt somewhat offended, but his approach was so calming and considerate that I didn't take it as an offense. I simply smiled and thanked him, saying I would keep it in mind if I ever changed my perspective. We continued our small talk for the remainder of the break. Later that afternoon, I found myself pondering my conversation with Jack. I thought to myself that if I were ever to consider an open relationship, he would be an ideal partner for it. He appeared very mature and respectful. Plus, he's married with kids, so there's no risk of anything more happening, as he made it clear he loves his wife and children. Of course, I feel the same way about Liam. He's my soulmate, and even if we were to explore such a thing, my love for him would remain unchanged. When I returned home that night, Liam called and informed me that he would be working until 8:30 p.m. because someone had called out sick at the last minute. I was quite upset about this because he was originally supposed to be home by 5, and we had plans for a romantic dinner and a special evening together. He apologized and promised to make it up to me when he got home. However, that night he didn't arrive until after 9, and when he did, he was completely exhausted and just collapsed on the couch. I was so frustrated that I left him sleeping there and went to bed. Around 3 a.m., he came into the bedroom, kissed me, but I pretended to be asleep. I was just so upset by his apparent disregard for me. The following morning, he left for work early and gave me a quick peck on the lips, but I didn't respond with a kiss. Later in the morning, he called to apologize once more for the previous night, but then immediately mentioned that his district manager had made a surprise visit to their store. He explained that he and his manager would be going out to dinner with him after work. I responded sarcastically, telling him to share something I wasn't already aware of. He inquired about what I meant, and I pointed out his habit of returning home late. I asked him when was the last time he came home at a reasonable hour. He concluded the call by expressing his love for me. All I managed to say was, "All right, bye," before hanging up. I was visibly upset, so I requested an early lunch break, which my manager approved. While I was in the lunchroom, Jack noticed my distress and came over to sit with me. He could tell that I was quite upset and began talking to me in his soothing manner. By the end of my break, I felt considerably better. Before we returned to work, he invited me to join him and some of his IT colleagues for happy hour. He suggested it would be beneficial for me to go out and not spend the evening alone at home. Feeling somewhat obliged, since Jack had cheered me up and made me feel better, I agreed to go with him to happy hour. During our time there, we had a great conversation. We discussed his marriage in detail and how he and his wife were going through something similar to Liam and me. Jack mentioned that opening up their relationship had actually saved their marriage, and they are still happily together to this day. After we left happy hour, I felt that tonight might be a good time to broach the subject with Liam and gauge his reaction. Liam arrived home around 9, and I asked him about his meeting with his district manager. He said it went well. Then he inquired about how my evening at happy hour went, and I told him it was fine but admitted that I would have enjoyed it much more if he had been there with me. I chose not to reveal that I had been there alone, engaging in a conversation with another guy, even though it was innocent. When there was a pause in our conversation, I brought up the topic of 5 people I work with who are in open relationships. Liam hadn't heard about this before and asked if it was about people sleeping around with others while staying together. I replied, "Yes, something like that." He expressed his disapproval, calling it both stupid and disgusting, and suggested that those in such relationships should simply break up to be free to sleep with whomever they desire. I explained that the purpose of these relationships wasn't to encourage infidelity, but rather to strengthen the bond between couples. He found this idea ridiculous and asked for an explanation, to which I had no response. That's when I mentioned Jane and her husband. He questioned if I was joking, and I assured him I wasn't. He wondered why I hadn't told him about this earlier, and I admitted I was afraid he might not want to spend time with them. He conceded, saying he wouldn't be hanging out with them anymore because he found it distasteful. After that, he continued probing with more questions about the topic. He asked for my opinion on it, and I replied that if it worked for those involved, then it was their choice. He further inquired if I would ever consider something like this, and I clarified that I would only do it if he were in agreement. He seemed surprised by my response and repeated, "So you're telling me that if I agreed to this, you would do it?" I confirmed, "Yes, but only if you agree to it." His reaction was simply, wow, okay," accompanied by a somewhat perplexed look. Our conversation ended when he received a call from his dad and spoke with him for nearly 20 minutes. Afterward, we started making out and had a special night together, a refreshing change. However, during the following week, Liam consistently worked late, sometimes past 7 p.m., due to a sudden employee resignation without notice. Feeling frustrated, I decided to join Jack for a drink again. We headed out right after work and stayed until 7 p.m. During this time, we delved deep into discussions about open relationships and how such an arrangement might work for both of us. I must admit, our conversation ventured into some sensitive territory, crossing boundaries, but it remained purely conversational. Afterward, I ordered takeout from the bar for Liam and me and returned home, without informing Liam about my time with Jack. For the subsequent week, things appeared to be improving between Liam and me. Although he still worked late, he managed to get home before 7 p.m. However, the night before, Liam informed me that his regional manager was coming in the next day and had scheduled an unexpected operations review. He apologized and suggested that we postpone our anniversary celebration to Friday. I could tell he sensed my disappointment, but I reluctantly agreed. He also mentioned that he needed to spend the evening in our home office to prepare for the following day, which meant he couldn't join me for our planned TV time. I felt extremely upset and just overall frustrated by the situation. The next morning, he woke up before 5 a.m. and left the house around 6 a.m. He kissed me goodbye and mentioned that he might not be back until after 9 p.m. because the regional manager had plans to take him and his manager out for dinner. I replied with an understanding, "Okay," as it was what I had anticipated. Before he left, I asked him if he promised to take me out the next day, and he assured me that he would be home by 5 p.m. no matter what. We shared another kiss and he departed. Throughout my workday, I couldn't help but dwell on the prospect of spending yet another evening alone. Just as my shift was concluding, I received a chat message from Jack asking if I'd like to join him for a drink after work. I contemplated it for a while before eventually agreeing. I decided to head home first to freshen up before meeting him at the tavern, arriving shortly after 5 p.m. Our outing lasted until nearly 8:30 p.m. While I was at the tavern with Jack, Liam sent me a text message asking, "Where are you?" My response was a simple, "I'm at the tavern with some people from work," which was technically true since there were a couple of colleagues from the loan processing department sitting at the bar. Following that, I inquired about how things were going with his regional manager, to which he replied, "Fantastic, absolutely fantastic." I responded with, "Great, see you later." I must admit that some of the conversation Jack and I engaged in that evening was highly inappropriate and deeply personal. We discussed topics such as preferences and positions, among other things. Towards the end of the night, he began to touch and hold my hands until I withdrew them. Then, as he walked me to my car, he surprised me with a long hug, followed by an unexpected kiss on the lips. The kiss caught me off guard, and though I didn't voice my discomfort at the time, I believe he picked up on my body language and realized I didn't appreciate it. I left for home, eagerly anticipating seeing Liam and discussing his meeting and dinner with the regional manager. However, when Liam arrived home, he behaved normally, except for the fact that he didn't come over to kiss me as he usually did. I inquired about how his meeting with the regional manager had gone, and he responded with, "Great," without elaborating further. He then asked about my workday, and I described it as the usual nonstop calls and high stress. His next question was about happy hour and who had attended. I replied that it was fine and that it consisted of people from the IT department, most of whom he hadn't met. He followed up by asking how many people were there, to which I replied, "I don't know, maybe 8 or 9, something like that." Feeling uneasy about lying, I inquired about his dinner. He revealed that they hadn't had dinner because his regional manager had decided to return home early to be with his wife and encouraged Liam and his manager to do the same with their significant others due to their successful ops review. My heart sank upon hearing this news. I then asked where he had been until now, and he replied, "At the tavern, looking for you." A wave of sickness washed over me, realizing I was caught but not entirely sure. That's when Liam confirmed, saying he had seen everything. I asked him what he meant, and he explained that he had witnessed me with that man, smiling and gazing at each other. He saw us holding hands and even observed us hugging and kissing. I was at a loss for words, so I simply said, "You don't understand." He responded, "No, I do understand now. It all makes sense why you brought up an open relationship out of nowhere last week. You were seeking permission to be with this guy." He then asked me how long I had been cheating on him, and I assured him that I hadn't cheated and that our interactions had been limited to conversations. I expressed my deep remorse, but he told me that apologies wouldn't suffice this time. His voice trembled as he mentioned how I had shattered his trust and broken his heart. Overwhelmed with guilt, I began to cry and continued to apologize, but he refused to listen. He said he was leaving to stay with his dad for a while, and I pleaded with him not to go, begging for his forgiveness. However, he remained resolute. He departed, and I called him while he was en route to his dad's house. He informed me that he wasn't ready to talk at the moment and needed distance to sort things out. I inquired about what that meant, and he replied, "You know what that means." I persisted with my apologies and pleas for forgiveness, but he remained silent and eventually ended the call without saying goodnight. Later, I walked into the bedroom and noticed that most of his clothes were gone, except for a couple of old winter coats, a few baseball caps, and an old pair of shoes. It became clear that he had already packed his belongings before I arrived home and had gone somewhere until I got back. That explained why he came in after I did. I couldn't hold back my emotions and collapsed on the bed, desperately hoping that this was all just a dreadful nightmare. Every day, I sent him text messages expressing my deep apologies and regret for my actions, along with declarations of my love for him. Although the messages were delivered, he never responded. I sank into a deep depression, prompting some of my girlfriends from work to come over on Saturday evening in an attempt to lift my spirits. They eventually took me out, and for the first time in nearly 8 years, I got incredibly drunk. I was sleeping off the effects of that night on Sunday morning when I heard someone knocking at the door. I peered out and saw that it was Liam. I felt a rush of happiness upon seeing him, but wondered why he didn't simply use his key to come in. When I opened the door, I immediately embraced him and poured out my feelings, telling him how much I loved and missed him and how depressed I had been since he left. He asked me to take a seat because he had something important to discuss. My immediate response was to start apologizing, but he cut me off, saying he didn't have time to waste on that because his dad was waiting for him in the car. Then he revealed that he had been promoted to a store manager position. I congratulated him enthusiastically and gave him a warm hug. I expressed my pride in his hard work and emphasized that no one deserved this promotion more than him. He dropped the bombshell that the store he'd be managing was in another state, and he would be relocating in just 2 weeks. I was utterly devastated and desperately asked if I could go with him. His reply shattered me. "No, I'm breaking up with you." Tears welled up, and I pleaded with him, asking why he was doing this. His response was blunt. "You know why." In despair, I inquired about my future, and he coldly informed me that I would have to figure it out on my own. He then revealed that he had already terminated the lease on our apartment. Fortunately, the rental manager agreed to reduce the remaining 8 months of the lease to just 60 days. Rents in our area had significantly increased since we signed the lease, and the landlord could easily rent it out at a higher rate. Liam mentioned that he had taken care of the final lease payment, but if I wished to remain in the apartment after 60 days, I would need to sign a new lease. He was well aware that I couldn't afford to live there without him since he covered 2/3 of our living expenses. He informed me that I could keep all the furniture and the commitment ring he had given me. I couldn't hold back my tears and pleaded with him for another chance, but his response remained firm. "No, it's over." In my distress, I rushed to the bathroom, fearing I might throw up. When I returned, he had disappeared. I called him desperately wanting to talk, but he explained that his dad was waiting and he had to leave. My attempts to converse with him were in vain. The rest of the morning was spent on the bathroom floor, a combination of crying and feeling sick to my stomach. In the afternoon, 2 of my work friends came over and immediately noticed how distraught I was. They asked for my mom's contact information, called her, and explained the situation, telling her that I needed her because Liam had ended our relationship. Mom made the 3-hour drive and arrived late last night, Sunday evening. Now it's early Monday morning, and I've been a restless wreck all night. So here I am, putting my thoughts on paper, seeking any advice on what steps to take next. Is there anything I can do to make this right? I'm aware that technically, I cheated on Liam by engaging in secret conversations with Jack. However, it's crucial to note that we didn't go beyond a kiss and a hug, and remember, he initiated the kiss. I didn't respond to it. I've truly learned my lesson and would never repeat such a mistake. If Liam decides to give me another chance, I promise I won't let him down. Right now, I'm facing the darkest period of my life, and I could really use some love and support. Thank you for taking the time to read this. Feel free to ask if you have any questions. Update: 74 days after my initial post. Hello everyone. I'm returning because many of you have been asking about my situation. Currently, I'm in a really tough spot, and I've moved back to my parents' house when the lease ended. I left my job at the bank, and with the help of my dad, mom, and brother, we moved my belongings back home, and they are now stored in the garage. To say that I'm broken right now would be an immense understatement. My mental state is worse than words can describe. Without my family's support, I don't know where I'd be at this moment. In fact, I might not even be here. I'm overwhelmed with regret and yearn to turn back time and make better choices. Looking back, I now see everything so clearly and understand what I foolishly gave up. To make things even worse, about a week before I left to return home, I bumped into Liam's father at the gas station. We've always had a good relationship, and we chatted for around 15 minutes. During our conversation, he revealed that Liam had come looking for me at the restaurant on the night I was with Jack. He wanted to share the news of his promotion and asked me to go with him. Hearing this completely devastated me. I've had a couple of phone conversations with Liam since he moved. He mentioned that he's genuinely happy with his new job despite being incredibly busy. I've sincerely apologized to him, and he graciously accepted my apology, thanking me for the wonderful years we spent together. He made it clear that, in his view, we're not a good match and won't be a couple again. However, he wants us to maintain a civil relationship. This has been incredibly painful for me, more than words can express, but I'm not pressuring him or acting clingy. I'm simply grateful that he's still willing to talk to me. During our last call a couple of weeks ago, I let him know that if he ever changes his mind, I'd be on the next flight out to see him. So that's pretty much the update for now. I have my first therapy session scheduled for next week, and over the past week, I've submitted job applications to several places. Please remember me in your prayers, and I genuinely appreciate all the support and kindness you've extended to me, even though we're complete strangers. Alright, that was a fun story. Now let's move on to another exciting one. Stay tuned and let's dive in. In my 3rd year of college, I visited the local city library and happened to meet a really attractive girl. I struck up a conversation with her, and we chatted for a while. She mentioned she was single, so we exchanged email addresses. Unlike me, she wasn't a college student. Instead, she was studying for a clerical position at a hospital. We exchanged emails for a bit, but it was a challenge to find a suitable time for a date since she was always working and I had my school commitments. Eventually, I discovered that she was going through a tough time with her ex-boyfriend. She wanted to break up with him but didn't want to let me go because she claimed to have genuine feelings for me and believed in my promising future. Our casual dating began a few months after that fateful library encounter. We embarked on exciting dates, explored new places together, and spent countless hours discussing our dreams and goals. The more time we shared, the more I realized how much I cherished her companionship. We shared many laughs, and she possessed a remarkable ability to brighten even my darkest days. After a couple of months of casually dating, I started noticing that our time together was increasing significantly. It felt like we were already in an unofficial monogamous relationship, and I was perfectly fine with that. My feelings for her had deepened, and I could sense that she felt the same way about me. Although we both had separate living spaces, we had plans to move in together once my current lease expired. It seemed like a natural progression for our relationship, and we were both enthusiastic about sharing a home. She explained that she had cut ties with her ex-boyfriend after their breakup due to his irresponsible behavior. He refused to pay rent and had children from different women. While her past was somewhat troubling, I trusted her judgment and believed she had made the right choice. However, as our relationship developed, there were instances when I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. She occasionally didn't answer her phone or took an unusually long time to respond to my texts, leaving me feeling frustrated and anxious. I tried to dismiss these concerns, thinking that perhaps she was simply busy or preoccupied with other matters. But after days of uncertainty, I finally gathered the courage to address the issue directly. I wanted her to be open and honest with me. When I confronted her, she disclosed that her ex-boyfriend was stalking her. It was an astonishing revelation, and I found myself torn between believing her story or not. My mind was filled with doubts and questions. Despite my uncertainty, I decided to approach her explanation with caution. One day, as I was returning from a friend's house, I had a hunch that she might be at home, so I decided to pay her a visit. It wasn't meant to be a surprise. In those days, we didn't have cell phones like we do now, and I had dropped by unannounced a couple of times before. As I approached the door of her apartment, to my astonishment, I encountered a man exiting her place. He was carrying a large box, and we passed each other in the hallway. I couldn't help but feel startled by this discovery, particularly since she had previously informed me that he was stalking her. It didn't add up to me that she would permit him into her apartment if their relationship was genuinely hostile. She assured me that he had come to retrieve his belongings, and the supposed stalking was due to some of his property still being in her possession. However, as she continued to assert this explanation, I couldn't help but begin to question whether she might be manipulating the truth. The whole situation appeared dubious, and I couldn't shake the persistent suspicion that there might be more to the story than she was disclosing. At that point in our relationship, I found myself at a crossroads, uncertain if I could place full trust in her. As the semester drew to a close, our impending plan to move in together approached, but my doubts lingered. Following the incident with her ex-boyfriend, she became remarkably affectionate, going the extra mile to express her love through cooking for me and thoughtful gifts. Part of me suspected that she might have sensed my uncertainty and was attempting to rekindle our romance. I must admit, I was easily swayed by such gestures, and over time she slowly began to regain my trust. As we took the step of moving in together and our relationship deepened, I believed everything was going smoothly. However, one unexpected day, she brought up the idea of an open relationship out of nowhere. I was taken aback as I had never contemplated such an arrangement before. She spoke about the potential freedom and liberation it could offer, but I was unsure how to respond, so I chose to remain silent, hoping she would abandon the topic. Little did I realize that this was merely the start of a revelation that would challenge my understanding of our relationship. During an intimate moment, she began sharing her desires regarding engaging in sexual encounters with multiple partners. At the time, it felt like a form of foreplay, and I didn't give it too much thought in the heat of the moment. However, once our passion had cooled, her words lingered in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she might genuinely want to turn this fantasy into a reality. My mind was consumed by these thoughts, and I found myself deeply contemplating the potential consequences of such a proposition. I began to question whether our love and commitment to each other were sufficient for her, and the idea of sharing her with someone else stirred up unsettling feelings within me. The uncertainty surrounding whether I could accept this weighed heavily on my emotions. This unexpected revelation left me torn and confused, leaving me unsure of how to navigate the situation. It led me to doubt the strength of our love, as it seemed our desires were diverging. As I grappled with my emotions, I recognized the need to take some time to process everything before making any decisions about our future. Following her expressions of desire during our intimate moments, which didn't resonate with me but seemed to please her, we engaged in further discussions. She disclosed that her ex-boyfriend had a penchant for watching her with other men and once again proposed the idea of an open relationship. Respectfully, I declined, explaining that I had no interest in such a lifestyle. Unfortunately, my decision didn't sit well with her, and she responded with passive-aggressive behavior, attempting to provoke me. Her efforts to irritate me didn't yield the desired results, so she gradually became less affectionate and even withheld intimacy as a way of expressing her frustration. likening my behavior to that of a child. This situation began to weigh heavily on me, occupying my thoughts and causing my academic performance to suffer due to a lack of concentration in school. After careful deliberation, I made the difficult choice to terminate the relationship. Upon returning home, I mustered the courage to convey my feelings to her, explaining that I no longer wanted to continue the relationship and that it would be best for her to find another place to live. Regrettably, her reaction was marked by anger, and she resorted to physical aggression accompanied by hurtful name-calling and desperate pleas in an attempt to change my decision. However, I had already resolved to move forward with my studies and focus on my future, believing that there was no room for such drama in my life. The next day, she startled me by claiming to be pregnant. I approached this claim with skepticism, wondering if it might be a tactic to manipulate me into reconsidering our breakup. Nonetheless, she sent me photos of pregnancy test results, seemingly attempting to validate her assertion. Despite this evidence, I remained resolute in my choice to end the relationship, as I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that she might have obtained the results from various sources to deceive me. As time went on, the situation became more worrisome. 2 months later, she messaged me, telling me that she had missed her period once again. Then, for months later, she sent me a photo of her growing baby bump. During this period, mutual friends informed me that they had seen her with other men, including her ex-boyfriend. This led me to consider the possibility that I might not be the father of her child. However, I couldn't ignore the fact that we had engaged in unprotected intercourse around the time of her pregnancy. Though I usually used protection, there was still a chance that something might have gone wrong. Adding to my uncertainty, given that I was in my final year of college and quite young, I felt unsure about how to handle the situation. Nevertheless, I was aware that if the child was indeed mine, I had a responsibility to step up and be a responsible father. Throughout her pregnancy, she vehemently asserted that the child could only be mine, despite my lingering doubts about her involvement with other men during our relationship. Reluctantly, I went along with her claims. Coincidentally, I happened to be out of town when the baby was born, and she tried to reach me. However, this was in a time before cell phones were prevalent, so communication was limited. I had traveled to a different city with a college friend for a weekend getaway, partly to avoid being at home during the birth as I had growing doubts that the child might not be mine. After the baby's birth, I visited them a few times in the following weeks. Not long after that, my parents told me that she had come to their house and introduced the baby as their new grandson. They were thrilled and looking forward to being grandparents. However, I had to stop everything and explain to them that I was quite certain the child was not mine. The moment I saw the baby, I felt no connection whatsoever. Though it was a baby, I didn't see anything in the child that resembled me in any way. Since she was already receiving government assistance, the state mandated a paternity test. This is a routine procedure when someone is receiving state or government aid like food stamps, as they need to identify the father for child support purposes. Given the circumstances, I decided it was best to proceed with the paternity test as scheduled. When the paternity test results came back, they showed that there was less than a 1% chance that the child was mine. With this conclusive evidence, I decided to make a clean break and move forward. The 2 times I saw her afterward, which was over 20 years ago now, she appeared almost tearful as she tried to apologize for what she had put me through back then. Through word of mouth, I eventually learned who the real father was, and it turned out to be her ex-boyfriend, the same one she had claimed was stalking her, the one I even encountered leaving her apartment with some boxes. Unfortunately, he already had other children from different relationships and couldn't provide any support for them. His health problems and struggles with pills led to his untimely death, leaving the child without a father figure. Throughout this difficult situation, I remained composed and fully cooperative, which resulted in a commendation letter from the county prosecutor's office for my responsible conduct. It was evident that she pursued me because I was in college and had a promising career ahead. I genuinely believed that she thought the child was mine, or perhaps she convinced herself to the point of believing it. While I didn't hold any resentment toward her, the combination of how she handled the situation, her suggestion of an open relationship, and the infidelity was enough for me to decide to end the relationship.